Hello and welcome to the first of the Weapons of series, looking at the dungeon weapons inside Shadowbringers instances. These then are the weapons of Holminster Switch, also known as the Lakeland sets. In each of these clips I will wear the full armor set, also from the dungeon to go with it, but we did separate videos on these sets to look at in greater detail if you're interested. Starting with the fending rolls, let's look at Paladin first. Paladin gets this beautiful black sword and this chunky metal shield. All of these items are essentially recolors of Heavensward weapons, with some of them being reused in Stormblood as vendor gear, and now here as 390 item level weapons as well. I think this is a really nice weapon set, to be honest, for Paladins. The black theme of many of these weapons really stand out best on the bigger pieces, and this shield is thankfully a nice big shield to go with this pretty evil looking longsword. It's like we're wielding a Dark Knight's two-hander in one hand. It goes quite well then with the Dark Sith Lord style Warrior of Darkness tanking armor for sure. Next, the Warrior Axe. This is a pretty nice black recolor of the Doman Iron War Axe from Stormblood. Gone is the shiny steel, and say hello to the black tarnished Crusher of Dreams. I really like this axe in particular. It has a great model, which first saw its appearance as the Skegoiled axe back in Heavensward, but it's great to see a dark version of it finally in the game, and I think this is quite a nice recolor. Dark Knight now, and this is a great rendition of the heavy metal greatsword from Heavensward, which also shared its model with the Shattered Heart weapon, which was actually Sir Zephyrin from the Knights of a Round weapon under Fordan, and you can actually get this on the Mog Station if you remember. So this is like the dark evil version of that light blade. The heavy metal greatsword has a nicer shine to it in my opinion, with brass and dark tarnished silver, but this new version is quite nice too, and if you're after that sort of dull black theme, then this works perfectly. On to the final tank set then. This is for Gunbreaker. This gunblade is a pretty nice rendition. It's a black trimmed silver blade, a dark black handle to go with it. The detailing on this is very intricate, and I quite like the styling. It's quite a stubby looking blade, but the intricate details remind me of those old revolvers that you would see in an old western movie. Very cool indeed, and I think it really matches the rest of the sets quite well, and in some ways looks quite a bit better than some of the others. Alright, maiming next, so Dragoon Lance time. Silver and blue is the theme here. You can immediately recognise this model from Heavensward for sure. It was designed so similarly to the Guards of Ishgard, what they would use. It's a nice recolour. Again, I somewhat think this colour scheme is more dull than the heavy metal lance that we could get previously, which also shares this model, and whilst still a dark weapon, holds a much stronger shine and contrast between the different sections of a lance. This time around it's not too bad, and I quite like the blue accent actually, but it's just not where I would like it personally. Striking, firstly the monks then. These claws look pretty chunky for fist weapons. I don't actually remember seeing many people with this model back in Heavensward. That's probably because I myself hadn't leveled my monk back then, but they do look rather imposing. The continuous complaint about being slightly flat in the colour scheme compared to the other recolours of the same model is rearing its head once again. I do however think the model is a nice one to see back in the game, especially because of how epic these things look as spiked fist weapons, but I would have probably wanted more black than dull silver on these. Samurai next then. The katana itself is fairly unremarkable in my opinion. The guard and hilt have subtle designs, and the scabbard is a bit boring to be honest. There's these little red berries or something and a brass detail section on this sort of brown colour. I suppose it suits the theme of the other sets quite well, but just in my opinion perhaps could have been a little bit more inspiring in general. It's just the same sword model with a different sort of scabbard that's not great. Aiming then. Barts Bow is this black and silver design. This is by no means my favourite recolor of this bow. That would be the Pine Composite Bow with the bright sky blue inlaid wood and brass detailing, or Astraled with its white and gold colour scheme. I think for a dark version they could have generally made it look a lot better by being more black than grey. The design is nothing too inspiring, which is a real shame considering the aiming armor set looks really cool with this. It could have had something so much better to go with it for bards. Machinist now, and this gun was always a favourite of mine in particular. This is a recolor of a level 55 weapon, Gajalahorn, which was white and gold. The heavy metal culverin is also another recolor, which was black and gold, and this time around then with this Lakeland culverin, they went with just this solid black. I quite like the blue eyes near the trigger area, and the black really does bring out that draconic look of this design. I prefer the gold trim on the Heavensward stuff, but this certainly has its own charm, and if you don't want that gold trim on everything, then this is one of the cooler Machinist guns you can actually get in the game. Alright, Dancer. Now, these are awesome. These chakrams are absolutely beautiful. One single flat metal colour with dark black detailing, making it look like dragon wings on the interior, then this polished sharp silver blade edge. It just looks amazing. I think Dancer got a really nice deal this time around with this, and you can make a glamour set to go with these so easily. It somewhat then makes me wish Dancer had existed in Heavensward so we could get a gold trim recolor of these, but I love them the way they are. They look painfully sharp, and that's everything I personally want from a set of chakram. Scouting then with Ninja. The Ninja blades are familiar to me as I used the heavy metal Ninja blades for quite some time as my own glamour. These dark ones look pretty cool then. It's such a ludicrous model. These massive spade-sized blades really stand out and suit the Ninja theme perfectly. Comparatively, I feel there are far too many small Ninja weapons in the game, so this to me at least is refreshing, and I'm glad they got another recolor, even if it's not the one I personally would have gone for. Alright, so on to healers. Let's start with White Mage's Cane. Oh, this thing. Oh boy, what can I say? I disliked it when it was that horrible green and white tree thing with Stiltine, and now I think it looks even worse. This dried up bouquet of dead flowers and leaves on one end and the average looking twig body does absolutely nothing for me personally. I would sooner use this as kindling than ever equip it. Purely awful. I think this is probably the worst weapon in Shadowbringers so far, easily. Scholar now then, with this book, I had to look up the original to see what was actually recolored here, you know, that's always a good start. Then I realised this particular weapon has been reused 7 times in the game before, and I cannot stand it any longer. It's just a basic looking book, and there are so many epic looking tomes since then that this is just not going to be interesting to me personally. I'm all for simple looking weapons, but when the same model has been used 6 times previous, and I never liked any of those either, then it's super doubtful that I'd be super enamored with yet another version of it. If you literally want this book with the same exact colour scheme, but obviously looks a little cooler, get Fagus Skeena, the level 55 Scholar book. It's the exact same model with a red background, but a solid gold bit of metal work on the front instead of this, which is infinitely better, but in general, I think I'll pass. And finally, Astral OG's Planisphere for healers. I like the red here with the pink orb, it's quite nice, a great contrast then of the original model Muspel from level 55 that featured a blue orb, a white centre and a gold trim. I think this looks nice and demonic with the red bits, and overall this is what I would have wanted from some of the other recolored weapons in this set. It's a nice looking weapon, and I think there's quite a bit you could actually do with this, and some really cool sets that you could come up with that are sort of demonic red healers. That would look really cool for sure. Alright, lastly on to casting. Firstly, the red mage weapon. This giant letter opener has a very dull coloured offhand crystal, and the weapon itself is merely a trigger away from being a thin gunblade. It's alright, I guess. Believe it or not, this actually shares the same exact model as the Kina weapon from the Palace of the Dead and the Serpent Captain's spell sword from your Grand Company vendor. It's a fairly boring recolor if I'm honest, whereas the originals had contrast with the colours they had contained, such as with the Serpent version it had a green orb with a yellow trim, but I think this Lakeland version actually takes a bit away from the design. I'm not really too much of a fan of this one, and I don't think black on black really works. Summoners getting the same problem then as Scholars, where the original model from Heavensward was nothing too special, and the 6 other recolors include some pretty nice alternative colours to this. I'm not a fan of this book. In fact, I was never a fan of making both Scholar and Summoner weapons identical in every way but colour. It feels to me personally that when they design these books they should try to pitch each one differently to represent the style of that job at that time. There's a lot of instances where old Scholar books and Summoner books were too basic looking due to this lack of direction. More recently there have been some changes in design, but this recolor is just a reminder of some of the models I really didn't like years ago, and I'd rather forget them if I'm honest. And finally, Black Mage. It's an alright recolor, black and grey. Personally, out of the 3 other recolors this staff had, I would go for the Scintillant staff as it has a bright blue gemstone and silver offset, but it's cool to have a darker version of it. Although I think again it's lost something by going quite a flat opaque colour like this. They could have spiced this and a few of the other models up a little by using white accents or a better gradient than this. If they wanted to include white, perhaps a marbling effect would have looked cool instead. It's not my favourite Black Mage rod nor recolor of this model in particular, but it's not the worst example from the weapons we have here. In general, I'm not a massive fan of recolors in general, especially when we're in brand new dungeons from Shadowbringers and we hit this the 7th or 8th remake of the same weapon, but that's my own opinion, and I'm sure yours is different. Some of the weapons look more impressive than others, and I'm a big fan of the tank stuff this time around. I might end up actually using the Paladin set with that armour for sure. Either way, those are just my opinions. What do you think about the weapons from this dungeon in particular? Hopefully I'll find better enjoyment out of the next dungeon on our list, Don't Meg, but until then, thank you all kindly for watching, and I'll see you all next time.